The unconventional cadets. Professor Zalax's bioluminescent patches pulsed with a mix of anxiety and resignation as he reviewed the latest directive from the Galactic Council. The message was clear: Earth's admission into the Galactic Federation necessitated the integration of human cadets into the prestigious Galactic Defense Academy. As the senior training director, he had spent centuries building the Academy's reputation as the foremost military institution in known space. Now, he feared watching it crumble because of political maneuvering. "Computer, begin official documentation," Zalax commanded, his secondary nervous system twitching. Date stamp: Galactic Standard Year 3478, pre-winter solstice. The three human cadets' arrival coincided with what their species called Christmas season, though Zalax failed to see the significance of this particular temporal marker. Mason Drake, Nova Chen, and Rex Thompson stood before him in the orientation chamber, their bodies seemingly unbothered by Centaur Prime's crushing 2.3 standard gravity. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy," Zalax began, his translated words echoing through the cavernous hall. "You are here because your species has achieved spacefaring status and earned a seat on the Galactic Council." However, he paused, multifaceted eyes scanning their faces, "that does not mean you are prepared for what awaits you." Rex Thompson, the shortest of the three humans, raised his hand with what Zalax would later learn was called a smirk. "Question, Professor. These training simulations you mentioned, they're basically just really advanced video games, right?" The assembled alien faculty collectively shifted in discomfort. Zalax's spots flared bright purple with indignation. "Cadet Thompson, our neural integration combat simulators are the most sophisticated training tools in the known galaxy. They are not entertainment devices." Nova Chen, her dark eyes reflecting the bioluminescent lighting, stepped forward. "With respect, Professor, humans have been using simulated environments for training for centuries. We call it gamification, turning complex learning objectives into engaging challenges." "Fascinating," Zalax replied dryly. "Perhaps you'd care to demonstrate your expertise in our introductory quantum physics assessment. Most species require 2 years of preparation before attempting it." Mason Drake, the tall redhead, exchanged glances with his fellow cadets. "Why wait? We're here to learn, aren't we?" The testing chamber was a marvel of galactic engineering, a perfect cube of transparent quantum crystalline walls that could generate holographic representations of up to 15 simultaneous dimensions. Most new students could barely comprehend 4 dimensions without suffering immediate neural feedback headaches. "Beginning standard assessment protocol," the computer announced. "Calculating 15-dimensional quantum probability matrices. Please solve for parallel universe convergence points." What happened next would be debated in academic circles for decades to come. Instead of approaching the problem through traditional mathematical visualization, the three humans treated it like what they called a puzzle game. They worked in perfect synchronization, Nova identifying patterns, Rex calculating trajectories, and Mason mapping convergence points. "This is impossible," Professor Tull, the quantum physics department head, whispered as the humans completed in hours what took most species months to grasp. "They're not solving it correctly, they're playing with it." But the results were undeniable. The humans had developed an entirely new methodology for quantum visualization, one that treated complex mathematical concepts as interactive spatial relationships. They weren't just solving the problems, they were intuitively understanding them in ways the Academy's traditional teaching methods had never considered. As the day progressed, more peculiarities emerged. During the preliminary physical assessments, the humans demonstrated what the medical staff could only describe as terrifying adaptability. Their bodies, evolved on a death world with varying gravitational forces and extreme climate shifts, adjusted to Centaur Prime's conditions at an accelerated rate. "It's all about proper breathing and form," Mason explained while deadlifting weights that would crush most species, his face red but determined. "On Earth, we have something called CrossFit. This is actually easier because the gravity's consistent." The real shock came during the preliminary psychic resistance screening. Most species required years of meditation and mental conditioning to withstand even basic telepathic contact. The humans, however, seem to possess natural barriers. Fascinating, the telepathy instructor, a mind weaver from the seventh dimension, observed. Their minds are chaotic. Attempting to establish psychic connection is like trying to grab water. They think in multiple directions simultaneously, their thoughts wrapped in layers of what they call earworms, repetitive musical patterns that act as natural shields. By day's end, Professor Zalax found himself in his private chambers, recording his observations for the official Academy records. Computer, personal note, the arrival of human cadets may represent the greatest challenge, or opportunity, in the Academy's history. Their unorthodox approaches to problem-solving, while arguably effective, threaten to undermine millennia of established teaching methodologies. And yet. He paused, his spots shifting to a contemplative blue. And yet, I cannot deny their potential. They possess a unique combination of physical resilience, mental adaptability, and what they term creative thinking that might, though I hesitate to suggest it, revolutionize our understanding of galactic warfare and defense. The professor's musings were interrupted by an alert from the Academy's security system. The humans had accessed the combat simulation chambers during their designated rest period. Instead of sleeping, they were running advanced battle scenarios, treating them like what they called raid nights, apparently a reference to their entertainment systems back on Earth. Computer, add final note for today, Zalax sighed. We may need to reconsider our entire approach to military education. The humans don't just think outside the box, they refuse to acknowledge the box exists in the first place. End recording. As Centaur Prime's binary sun set, casting the Academy in shades of purple and gold, Professor Zalax couldn't shake the feeling that the arrival of these three humans marked the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. Whether that was cause for celebration or concern remained to be seen. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that humanity's unconventional approaches would soon be tested in ways no one could have predicted. As the humans celebrated their first Christmas away from Earth, dark forces were stirring in the outer reaches of the galaxy, forces that would put the Academy's newest cadets on a collision course with destiny. The greatest test wasn't going to be whether humans could adapt to the Academy's standards, but whether the galaxy was ready for humanity's unique approach to warfare, peace, and everything in between. Breaking protocol. Computer, resume documentation, Professor Zalax commanded, his bioluminescent patches flickering with what his colleagues had begun to recognize as excitement rather than his usual anxiety. 3 standard months have passed since the human cadets' arrival, and I must report a series of unprecedented developments. The Academy's hallowed halls had never witnessed anything quite like the chaos that ensued when Mason Drake discovered a critical flaw in their supposedly unbeatable tactical simulation system. It happened during what the humans called Finals Week, though they had somehow compressed 3 years of standard curriculum into a single quarter. The simulation isn't actually calculating real-time quantum battlefield variations, Mason had announced during the advanced tactical assessment, his red hair disheveled from hours in the neural interface chamber. It's using pre-calculated probability matrices. That's why the supposedly random events always fall within expected parameters. Nova Chen, who had been monitoring the system's base code while running her own simulations, nodded in agreement. The AI is sophisticated, but it's not truly adaptive. It's like playing chess against a computer that only knows established strategies. Rex Thompson, sprawled in his customized interface chair, modified to accommodate what he called his gaming posture, grinned that insufferable grin of his. In other words, Professor, your unbeatable system has patterns. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's pattern recognition. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Academy's faculty. The tactical simulation system, developed over centuries by the finest minds in the galaxy, had been effectively solved by 3 humans treating it like what they called a speedrun challenge. But that was just the beginning. During the advanced xenobiology practical examinations, Nova Chen revolutionized their understanding of interspecies medical treatment. Rather than following the standard protocol of memorizing thousands of species-specific procedures, she developed what she called a modular approach. Every species, no matter how different, follows certain biological principles, Nova explained to a stunned medical faculty. Instead of treating each species as a unique case, we can categorize biological systems by their fundamental functions. It's like having a universal toolbox instead of thousands of specialized tools. The approach was so effective that several senior medical officers requested immediate curriculum revisions. But it was Rex Thompson who truly pushed the boundaries of what the Academy thought possible. During a routine psychic defense class, Rex discovered that human earworms, those annoying repetitive songs that get stuck in their heads, could be weaponized. By deliberately focusing on what he called the most annoying TikTok songs, he created a feedback loop that not only blocked telepathic intrusion but actually caused discomfort to would-be mental intruders. It's psychological warfare, Rex explained, while the Mindweaver instructor recovered from exposure to something called Baby Shark. Our minds are naturally chaotic, but we can weaponize that chaos. Professor Zalax found himself increasingly fascinated by the humans' ability to turn their apparent weaknesses into strengths. Their shorter lifespans, rather than being a disadvantage, seemed to drive them to accomplish more in less time. Their physical limitations compared to some species were offset by their remarkable adaptability and ingenuity. But everything changed during the winter solstice celebration, what the humans called Christmas Eve. The alert came during the traditional Feast of Understanding, a diplomatic event meant to foster cooperation between species. Mason, Nova, and Rex had been teaching their fellow cadets about Earth holiday traditions when the Academy's long-range sensors detected something impossible. Multiple quantum ruptures detected in sectors 7 through 13, the computer announced, its usual calm voice carrying an edge of urgency. Unknown vessels emerging from subspace. Configuration matches no known species. The Academy's defensive protocols activated immediately, but the situation was unprecedented. The unknown vessels weren't just approaching, they were appearing and disappearing across multiple dimensional planes, using technology that shouldn't have been possible. Those energy signatures, Nova whispered, studying the sensor readings. They're using the same quantum probability matrices as our tactical simulators. They've found a way to apply our training protocols to actual space-time manipulation. Professor Zalax felt his spots pale to a sickly white. Computer, compare vessel configurations to historical records. Include restricted archives. The response chilled the room, match found. Vessels share 89% design similarity with theoretical models from the Forbidden Archives. Category, Omega-level threat. Species designation, the predecessors. The predecessors, a mythical race that had allegedly ruled the galaxy eons ago, before vanishing into what scholars called the Great Beyond. Most modern species considered them merely legends, cautionary tales about the dangers of technological overreach. But the evidence was undeniable. Somehow, they had returned, and they had chosen the Academy's location for their first emergence. Well, Rex said, breaking the stunned silence, looks like we're about to put all that training to real use. Anyone up for a Christmas raid boss fight? Mason was already moving, his tactical mind racing. Nova, can you adapt your modular biology approach to analyze their ship designs? Look for fundamental patterns, weak points. On it, she replied, fingers flying over the holographic interface. Rex, remember that feedback loop you created with the earworms? What if we could apply that principle to their quantum probability drives? Professor Zalax watched in amazement as the three humans, faced with an impossible threat that had frozen most of the faculty in terror, immediately began developing countermeasures. They weren't just applying their training, they were innovating in real time, combining seemingly unrelated concepts into potential solutions. Computer, emergency notation, Zalax commanded. The human cadets have demonstrated that their greatest strength may not be their physical capabilities or their adaptive minds, but their ability to face the unknown without paralysis. Where other species seek safety in established protocols, humans seem to thrive in chaos. As the unknown vessels drew closer, casting ethereal shadows through multiple dimensions, Zalax made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Attention all faculty and cadets," he announced, his spots glowing with determination. "As of this moment, I am implementing Emergency Protocol 0. All standard procedures are suspended. We will follow the human cadets' lead in developing our defense strategy." The looks of shock on his colleagues' faces were matched only by the fierce grins of the three humans, who were already transforming the Academy's command center into what they called a raid headquarters. As the binary sun set on what might be the last peaceful evening in galactic history, Professor Zalax couldn't help but appreciate the irony. The very traits that had made humans seem unsuitable for the Academy, their chaos, their disregard for tradition, their relentless drive to challenge established systems, might be the galaxy's only hope for survival. The predecessors were about to learn that humanity had changed the rules of the game. And as Rex would say, they were in for one hell of a boss fight. First Contact Protocol. "Computer, emergency situation log," Professor Zalax dictated, his bioluminescent patches pulsing rapidly in the dim light of the Academy's transformed command center. Time stamp, 2347 Earth Standard Time, December 24th, what the humans insist on calling Christmas Eve. The command center had been completely reorganized according to what the human cadets called raid optimization. Holographic displays showed quantum probability matrices across 15 dimensions, while Rex Thompson's hastily assembled aggro management system monitored the predecessor's ship movements through a modified version of the Academy's tactical simulator. "They're using our own training protocols against us," Nova Chin explained, her fingers dancing across multiple holographic interfaces. "But they're running an older version, more rigid, less adaptive. They didn't account for the modifications we made to the system." Mason Drake stood at the tactical display, his red hair reflecting the ethereal glow of the quantum visualization matrices. "Their ships are appearing and disappearing across multiple dimensional planes, but there's a pattern. They're not just jumping randomly, they're following probability paths of least resistance." "Like speedrunning a game," Rex added, not looking up from his modified console. "They're using quantum exploits to skip through spacetime, but they're limited by their own programming." Professor Zalax watched in fascination as the three humans coordinated their efforts with an efficiency that bordered on telepathic. They had turned the impending invasion into something they understood intimately, a complex, multidimensional challenge that required both strategic thinking and split-second timing. "Professor," Mason called out, his voice tight with urgency, "we need access to the Forbidden Archives. All of it. If these really are the predecessors, we need to understand what we're dealing with." The request sent ripples of shock through the assembled alien faculty. The Forbidden Archives contain technological and historical data deemed too dangerous for general access, including theoretical weapons that could tear reality itself apart. But these were not normal circumstances. "Granted," Zalax said, ignoring the protests of his colleagues. "Computer, full access to Forbidden Archives, authorization." Zalax Prime override. The data streamed into the holographic displays, thousands of years of accumulated knowledge about the mysterious race that had once ruled the galaxy. The humans absorbed it with their characteristic speed, finding patterns and connections that generations of scholars had missed. "Look at this," Nova said, highlighting a section of ancient text. "The predecessors didn't just disappear, they transcended. They tried to force evolve their entire species into beings of pure energy and consciousness. But something went wrong," Rex continued, his usual grin replaced by intense concentration. "The process was incomplete. They got stuck between dimensions, neither fully physical nor fully transcendent. And now they're back to finish what they started," Mason concluded grimly. "They're not just invading, they're harvesting. They need organic life to complete their transformation. The implications were staggering. The predecessors weren't simply returning to reclaim their ancient empire, they intended to consume all organic life in the galaxy as fuel for their transcendence. But the humans weren't finished. While the faculty struggled to process this apocalyptic revelation, the three cadets were already developing a counter-strategy. Their quantum probability drives operate on pure mathematics, Nova explained, pulling up complex equations. But human consciousness, our chaos, our creativity, it's inherently unpredictable. We can use that. Rex nodded enthusiastically. Remember how my earworm defense worked against telepathic invasion? What if we could broadcast that same kind of cognitive chaos across quantum frequencies? A psychic denial-of-service attack, Mason mused, already modifying the Academy's defense systems. We flood their probability matrices with so many potential outcomes that their systems can't calculate a stable path through spacetime. Professor Zalax felt his spots shift to a deep blue of amazement. The humans weren't just thinking outside conventional military doctrine, they were combining concepts from dozens of different disciplines into something entirely new. But we'll need more than just defense, Nova added, her dark eyes reflecting the holographic displays. We need to take the fight to them. Professor, those theoretical weapons in the archives, could we modify them to target quantum probability fields instead of physical matter? The question sparked a flurry of activity among the faculty. The weapons Nova referred to had been banned for good reason, they could literally unravel the fabric of spacetime. But if properly modified, it's possible, Zalax admitted. But the calculations required would take years to dash. We don't have years, Mason interrupted. But we do have 3 humans who are very, very good at finding shortcuts. The next few hours were a blur of activity as the humans orchestrated what they called a speed build. They combined principles from quantum physics, xenobiology, psychic warfare, and half a dozen other disciplines into a hybrid defense system unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The predecessors' ships drew closer, their dimensional jumps becoming more frequent as they approached the Academy. But now, thanks to the humans' modifications, every sensor and defense system was ready to respond in ways the ancient beings could never have anticipated. One more thing, Rex said, as the final preparations were completed. Professor, remember how you said accepting us was both your biggest mistake and your most brilliant decision? We're about to prove which one it was. As if on cue, the quantum sensors lit up with activity. The predecessors had arrived in force, their ships materializing across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The moment of truth had come. Computer, final notation, Zalax commanded, his spots glowing with a mixture of fear and pride. As we face this unprecedented threat, I am struck by a profound realization: the galaxy has long viewed humanity's chaotic nature as a weakness to be contained. We now know better. Their chaos is not a flaw, it is an evolved response to surviving on a death world. And now, that same chaos may be our greatest weapon against beings that have forgotten what it means to be truly alive. The binary suns of Centaur Prime had set, leaving the Academy illuminated only by the ethereal glow of quantum ruptures and the fierce determination in 3 pairs of human eyes. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin, and it would be fought not just with advanced technology, but with everything that made humanity unique: their creativity, their adaptability, and their absolute refusal to accept impossible odds. "Merry Christmas, you interdimensional bastards," Rex muttered, initiating the defense sequence. "Time to show you how we do things on Earth." Chaos theory in practice. "Computer, combat log initiation," Professor Zalax commanded, his voice steady despite the dimensional distortions rippling through the Academy's command center. Time stamp, 001 Earth Standard Time, December 25th, what humans call Christmas Day. The first wave of predecessor ships materialized across 7 different dimensional planes simultaneously, their crystalline structures defying conventional physics. But the humans were ready. "Execute Operation Chaos Theory," Mason Drake ordered, his hands flying across the tactical interface. The Academy's modified defense systems responded instantly, flooding the quantum probability fields with what Rex had dubbed weaponized unpredictability. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The predecessor's ships, dependent on stable probability matrices for their dimensional jumps, began to falter. Some phased only partially into reality, while others became trapped between dimensional states. Their systems are trying to compensate, Nova Chin reported, monitoring the quantum fluctuations. They're attempting to recalculate their probability paths, but our chaos algorithms are forcing them to process too many variables. Rex Thompson's earworm defense had been amplified to cover the entire quantum spectrum, broadcasting human consciousness patterns directly into the predecessor's navigation systems. The ancient beings, used to perfect mathematical precision, found their calculations corrupted by everything from baby shark to complex emotional responses. They're not just confused, Rex observed with satisfaction, they're experiencing information overload. Their quantum drives can't handle the concept of human irrationality. But the predecessors hadn't ruled the galaxy for eons without learning to adapt. A second wave of ships emerged, these equipped with what appeared to be probability-dampening fields, an attempt to impose order on the humans' chaos. They're trying to force reality to conform to their calculations, Mason noted grimly. Time for Phase 2. Nova, initiate the biological interface. Nova's modifications to the Academy's xenobiology systems had produced something unprecedented, a way to broadcast organic neural patterns directly into quantum space. The predecessors, in their quest for transcendence, had forgotten what it meant to be truly alive. Now they were being reminded, forcefully. Transmitting biological quantum signatures, Nova confirmed. Every ship within range is being bombarded with the raw data of organic life, evolution, adaptation, mutation, death, rebirth. Everything they tried to transcend. The effect was devastating. The predecessors' ships began to display erratic behavior, their perfect formations breaking down as their partially transcendent crews struggled with the flood of biological information. They're experiencing physical sensation again, Nova explained, her eyes fixed on the biological readouts. Pain, hunger, fear, everything they thought they'd evolved beyond. It's overwhelming their consciousness. But victory wouldn't come easily. A third wave of predecessor ships emerged, these emanating energy signatures that made the quantum sensors scream in protest. They had activated the very weapons they'd planned to use for harvesting organic life. Reality destabilization detected, the computer announced. Local spacetime integrity at 67% and falling. Professor Zalax felt his spots pale to pure white. The predecessors were willing to tear reality itself apart rather than accept defeat. But once again, the humans had anticipated this move. Execute Operation Gaming the System, Mason commanded with a fierce grin. Rex's console lit up with complex patterns. Remember how I said their quantum drives were running an older version of our training protocols? Well, every system has exploits, even ones that can destroy reality. The humans had spent hours analyzing the forbidden archives, not just for weapons data, but for something far more valuable, system vulnerabilities. The predecessor's technology, for all its advancement, still operated on fundamentally predictable principles. We're not just fighting their weapons, Mason explained as he coordinated the defense. We're hacking them. Their entire civilization is basically running on ancient code, and we've found the backdoors. Nova's fingers danced across her interface. Initiating quantum code injection. Let's see how their reality-destroying weapons handle a buffer overflow error. The response was beyond anything they could have predicted. The predecessors' weapons, designed to unravel the fabric of spacetime, began to turn inward. Their ships, caught in recursive probability loops, started to fold in on themselves. They're experiencing what we call a crash to desktop, Rex announced with savage satisfaction. Only in this case, the desktop is reality itself, and they're on the wrong side of the blue screen of death. But the battle's true turning point came from an unexpected source, the Academy's youngest students. Inspired by the humans' example, cadets from dozens of species had begun contributing their own unique perspectives and abilities to the defense effort. A young crystalline being discovered that their natural resonance frequencies could disrupt the predecessor's quantum communications. A Mindweaver apprentice found that by combining their telepathic abilities with Rex's earworm defense, they could create feedback loops that drove the ancient beings to distraction. This is what they forgot, Professor Zalax realized, his spots shifting to a deep purple of understanding. The true strength of life isn't in transcendence or perfect order, it's in diversity, in chaos, in the endless capacity for adaptation and change. The predecessor's final attack came not with overwhelming force, but with an attempt at communication. Their message, transmitted across all quantum frequencies, was both a threat and a plea: submit to transcendence. Evolution demands it. Mason's response, broadcast back on the same frequencies, was pure humanity. Evolution isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming better at being what you are. And what we are is gloriously, beautifully imperfect. The battle reached its climax as Nova's biological quantum signatures, Rex's chaos algorithms, and Mason's tactical exploits combined into what they called a combo finish. The predecessor's ships, caught between dimensions, their crews overwhelmed by the return of organic sensation and emotion, began to dissolve. But instead of destruction, something extraordinary happened. The ancient beings, their consciousness stripped of artificial perfection, started to reintegrate with physical reality. They were experiencing true evolution, not the forced transcendence they had sought, but a genuine transformation born of chaos and adaptation. Computer, update situation log, Professor Zalax commanded as the dimensional distortions began to fade. The humans have not just defeated the predecessors, they have shown them a new path. In seeking to correct humanity's chaos, our ancient enemies have instead been transformed by it. As the binary sons of Centaur Prime began to rise on what the humans were calling Christmas morning, the Academy's command center erupted in celebration. Species that had never physically touched before embraced, their differences forgotten in the joy of survival and victory. "Well," Rex said, finally allowing exhaustion to show on his face, "that's one way to spend Christmas. Anyone up for opening presents?" A new dawn. Final documentation entry, Professor Zalax began, his bioluminescent spots glowing with a warm, steady light that his students had come to recognize as pride. Time stamp, 1 standard month after the Christmas incident, as it's now being called throughout the galaxy. The Academy's Great Hall, usually austere and formal, had been transformed. Representatives from every spacefaring civilization had gathered for what humans would call a graduation ceremony, though it was unlike any in the institution's history. The air hummed with excitement and possibility. Mason Drake, Nova Chen, and Rex Thompson stood at the center of it all, their standard cadet uniforms now adorned with symbols that hadn't existed a month ago, quantum patterns that shifted and changed, representing their unique contribution to galactic civilization. When these three humans first arrived, Zalax continued, addressing the assembled dignitaries, I believed they would either be the Academy's greatest mistake or its most brilliant success. I was wrong on both counts. They were neither a mistake nor a success, they were a catalyst for evolution. The aftermath of the Christmas battle had reshaped more than just the Academy's training protocols. The very nature of galactic civilization was changing, influenced by what scholars were now calling the human factor. Nova Chen's modular approach to xenobiology had revolutionized interspecies medicine. Her insights during the battle, combining organic neural patterns with quantum mechanics, had opened up entirely new fields of study. The medical wing of the Academy had been renamed the Chen Institute for Adaptive Biology. The key was never about memorizing every species' unique characteristics, Nova explained to a group of eager students from across the galaxy. It's about understanding the underlying patterns of life itself, how different solutions evolved to solve similar problems. Mason Drake's tactical innovations had transformed military theory. His ability to find exploits in seemingly perfect systems had led to the creation of the Drake Protocol, a new approach to defense that emphasized adaptability over rigid structure. Perfect systems are vulnerable systems, Mason lectured, his red hair catching the light of the binary suns. The moment you think you've created something unbeatable, you've actually created something inflexible. True strength lies in being able to change, to adapt, to surprise even yourself. But perhaps the most profound changes had come from Rex Thompson's innovations in quantum consciousness integration. His earworm defense had evolved into a new field of study, the intersection of organic consciousness and quantum mechanics. Reality isn't just math, Rex explained, for once entirely serious. It's stories and songs and jokes and dreams. The predecessors forgot that, and it nearly destroyed them. But now they're learning again, and so are we. The predecessors themselves had undergone the most remarkable transformation. Those who had survived the battle had begun a process they called conscious de-evolution, a voluntary return to a state of balanced existence between physical and quantum reality. We sought perfection through transcendence, their new ambassador explained, their form shifting between solid and energy states. Humanity showed us that true evolution embraces imperfection, celebrates it, learns from it. We had forgotten how to learn. The academy itself had been transformed. The rigid 10-year curriculum had been replaced with what Rex called an open-world learning system. Students progressed not by memorizing established protocols, but by demonstrating their ability to adapt, innovate, and collaborate across species boundaries. Computer, personal notation, Zalax dictated privately. The humans have taught us that education isn't about reaching a predetermined standard of excellence. It's about discovering new standards we never imagined possible. The graduation ceremony reached its climax as the 3 human cadets received their new titles, not just graduates, but Innovators First Class, a rank created specifically to recognize their unique contributions. But this isn't really about us, Mason insisted during his speech. This is about what happens when different species, different ways of thinking, different approaches to reality all come together. Humans didn't save the galaxy, cooperation did. Diversity did. The willingness to try new things and accept failure as part of growth did. Nova stepped forward, her dark eyes scanning the assembled crowd. The Academy taught us everything it knew about the galaxy. In return, we taught it something about humanity, that our greatest strength isn't in our muscles or our minds, but in our ability to bring people together, to find connections where none seemed possible. And we're just getting started, Rex added with his characteristic grin. Wait until you see what we've got planned for next Christmas. The laughter that filled the great hall was more than just amusement, it was the sound of barriers breaking down, of species learning to see the galaxy through each other's eyes. The crystalline beings were telling jokes, the mind weavers were learning human songs, and even the reformed predecessors were beginning to understand the value of imperfection. Final notation, Zalax concluded, his spots pulsing with multiple colors in what he realized was a very human display of emotion. The galaxy has entered a new age, not one of perfect order or chaotic freedom, but a dynamic balance between the two. And it all began because 3 humans refused to accept that anything was impossible. As the celebration continued into the night, Professor Zalax watched his newest graduates with a mixture of pride and anticipation. Mason was already working on plans for a cross-species tactical training program. Nova was discussing the implications of quantum biology with a group of fascinated predecessor scientists. Rex was teaching a group of alien cadets something called speedrunning techniques. Computer, one last personal note, Zalax added softly. I used to believe that accepting human cadets was the biggest mistake of my career. Now I understand it wasn't a mistake at all, it was simply the galaxy evolving in ways we never expected. And isn't that, after all, the very essence of humanity? The binary suns set on a changed galaxy, their light reflecting off the quantum crystalline walls of the Academy. Within those walls, the future was being reshaped by beings who understood that the greatest achievements come not from reaching for perfection, but from embracing the beautiful chaos of possibility. And somewhere in the Great Hall, a human voice started singing a Christmas carol, soon joined by dozens of alien voices, each adding their own unique harmony to the song. It wasn't perfect, but that was exactly what made it beautiful,